I was working at Phoenix Investment Partners and then Phoenix, which was the insurance and annuity and asset management company at the time, as the CMO. And I could not wait for them to relieve me of the pain of working there, which they did. They wanted to say bye-bye, and I was glad they paid me to do it. So I was sitting by a pool in our yard, talking to a friend. She does a lot of work with C-suite folk. And we're just chatting about what's next. And I said, I don't know what's next, but I know it's not going to be in corporate America. And I actually had this in my book and acknowledge her as such about finding a career as opposed to finding a job. And so what she advised me to do, and that was that she recommended I talk to 5 different people, 10 is even better, and ask them, what do you see? Just have to say, I'm looking to make a career change. I'd love to get your perspective. And so I went to a bunch of people and said, what do you see to be my strengths? We'd have a conversation on that. What do you see be areas I should avoid or areas of weaknesses, essentially, is what we're looking for. And what would you do if you were me? And it's really a matter of just sort of talking to people that know you well and really boiling it down to what's your unique value? What do you bring to the table? And I was thinking about that. I said, my unique skills are I listen well, I'm persuasive, and I'm highly persevering. Those are my skills.
Welcome to Midlife Remix, the podcast that explores midlife transitions and how people have reshaped their careers and lives to focus on what truly matters. I'm Stephen Miao, a coach who helps guide professionals through these often challenging but rewarding pivots. Each episode wraps up with an inspiring exercise to help you turn insights into action and move forward on your journey. Hello, everyone. Today we have Jack Sharry on the podcast. Jack is LifeYield's Chief Growth and Podcast host for Wealth Tech on Deck. He's also a professor at Babson College. And I think what Jack has done well over his career is this drive for transformational change in technologies. And I'm really excited to learn more from him about his career and how he has gotten to the place where he is today. Welcome, Jack.
Steve, great to be with you. This is should be fun. I've never heard what I do characterized that way. I kind of liked it. I'll have to capture that so I can reshare it.
Let's start out with talking a little bit about how you grew up and if there were any specific things that shaped your experience or your family influence that helped you deal with resilience and able to adjust to changes in your life.
So I was always a kid that was enterprising and striving to have the kind of things I saw others have. A lot of it was driven by my mother, who I'm a real student of life and the world, but I was never a good student in the classroom. And I was forever late in procrastinating in the work at hand, whatever the assignment might have been. And I remember one assignment in particular where I was woefully late, and I was doing it the last night, late in the evening. And my mother said, "You'll never amount to anything." And that took only, 40 or 50 years to get over, but it was a driver throughout my life to prove her wrong. Well, it hurt a lot for a long time. It certainly motivated me.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about some of those challenges that you've early on had in your career and maybe some of the strategies that you used to, maybe it was not a strategy at the time, but maybe some ways of how you were able to adjust to those changes?
So a lot of it had to do with just plain old hard work. And so I mowed more lawns. I babysat more families. Give you an example. I worked at a sporting goods store and was hired to sweep the floor and to send packages back to the factory. It was a good-sized store, and they sold racing bathing suits for Hartford area, lots of competitive swim teams. And when I joined that company, it's as employee 18, between sweeping the floor and sending back packages, they had, I think, 7 or 8 teams that had a team discount. And I went to the manager and said, if I could get you 10 teams, could I get a nickel raise? I was making $1.55 at the time. And he laughed at me. We ended up as the second largest seller of Speedo bathing suits in the U.S. And while I was sweeping the floor, in fact, one day I still had this floor sweeping job as we grew to over 50 teams that had signed up for the discount, all frankly at my behest. And I still swept the floor, though. That was all part of the deal. It took a long time to get that nickel raise, by the way. And anyway, someone came in with a letter I had sent out, typed myself, of course, and asked if Mr. Sharry was in. I put the broom down and said, "I'm Mr. Sharry," all of 17, 16 years old. My parents did okay, not great, did okay. But if I wanted anything, I had to go earn it. So that, in terms of that it was early years and then onward, it was always around bootstrapping it myself, just making it happen.
So with all these changes that you've navigated over your career, what has inspired you, or what has helped you to stay relevant in all of that? You had a very long career with a lot of successes, and I'm sure also failures.
Oh, yeah.
If you can talk maybe about both, and how maybe your failures helped you shape what you do today.
Yeah. I think if you were to chart it, you'd see a lot of highs and lows. Just my experience in following so many others that have enjoyed some measure of success. It's both. And so much of the learning happens as part of the lows. And then you hopefully translate that into what could be the next high. After lots of fits and starts in my 20s, I found myself as a wholesaler in this industry. Didn't know anything about the industry, didn't know anything about anything, sales, wholesaling, anything. But I knew how to talk in front of a group because I'd been a tennis pro. So I knew how to tell a story. I knew how to help people and teach them. Early on, that's what I did. I copied the best. I got to know them. I befriended them. They loved being mentors, and I loved being a mentee. So another thing I would recommend those that are in this process is learn how to be a mentee and really seek that out, which I was fortunate enough. It's
one thing that you mentioned was mentee, which I think is a very important concept. I forget who, but a long time ago, somebody said to me, you always have to have 3 roles in your life. One is that you have a mentor who teaches you. Then you have a peer who you can spar with. And then you have somebody that you're mentoring so that you can share the knowledge, but also by sharing the knowledge, you deepen your knowledge. So
totally.
I really like that comment that you made.
Yeah, that's been my experience. I probably mentor. It's not always consistent. Some we meet every month. Others, sporadically. But I probably have 30 or 40 mentees right at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I also have mentors. There's people that I look up to, even though they may be younger in years, but they have certain experience that I don't have. So one of the things I learned early on when I didn't know anything and I knew I didn't know anything is I really sought out those that did.
Mm-hmm.
And I observed that their favorite thing to do was to talk to me, to share their knowledge. That's one of the things about the whole mentor-mentee thing is it really goes both ways. So it's been, for me, I'm always trying to learn, always trying to develop, always trying to share, always trying to advance. And I find that I'm paid back just in an enormous way. The more I give, the more I get. So for me, it's selfish. It's easy and fun and selfish.
Share with me how you pick a mentor. I always had mentors in my entire life, and I gravitate to people that I can learn from.
Yes.
How have you approached it? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that. Yeah, and specifically, what I like what you said was that you have mentors now too, and you're a very experienced executive. How can people who are further along in their career still continue to have mentors, and how do you pick them?
Well, I think the key thing here is I am a lifelong learner, and more than the buzzword of that, I always want to learn. One of them has actually heard it. He was surprised I said this, but John Thiel, who ran Merrill for many years and quite successfully so, has just started up a new firm called Indivisible Partners, has become a friend. He's on our board, probably as highly regarded an executive as anyone I know in our industry. And so he and I talked as a board member, as someone that I was trying to find people that are smart like John and willing to share. And I said, well, I appreciate your mentorship. And he said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I just learned from you and I really appreciate it. So I'm not, basically we say, I'm not a mentor to you, you know, but he is. Now, we don't have a formal document or anything, so we just talk and I learn. And the other side of that, I should note, is that because I talk to so many people in that way, this is something, frankly, that is, if you want to know my secret sauce to success, keys to success, is I listen. I talk to a lot of people. And because I listen well, I'd say it's my great strength, to be honest. I listen well, then I know a lot of stuff. That's what I seek to do. And in so doing, I learn so much. I try to be careful about opening my big fat yap because I got a lot to say. And so what I try to do is just listen and listen. And then when I do speak, I want to make sure it has real impact, real usefulness, utility. And so when I do speak, I wanted to make sure that it advances the cause. So guess what? People want to talk to me. But I also know I can learn. And if I can provide benefit, it's a symbiotic, mutually relationship. And so I do it literally every day.
Yeah, I'm hearing two things that you said, which I think are very important. One is the listening part, but also I think what comes before the listening part really is the curiosity. Because
Yes.
only if we're curious,
Yes.
we're able to listen.
Yes.
I feel the same way. I know everything that I know about myself and what I know. I don't really want to talk about that. I'd rather hear from you what you have to say of things that I don't know.
Yes. Yes. I'm right there with you.
And in some way, as you said, it's selfish because it actually benefits me more to listen to you than it benefits you. But people, I think, like it also when people listen, because most people listen with the intent to speaking rather within the intent to understanding.
So back in 1983, the New York Hilton, I was a fresh out of the training class wholesaler. I knew nothing about what I was selling. I knew nothing about selling. I knew nothing about the people I was talking to. And I had the good fortune of taking a class from a gentleman by the name of Dr. Fernando Flores. So Flores was, at the age of 27, was the finance minister of Chile and wound up in jail under the Allende regime and was tortured. He already had a computer science degree, and he wound up at Berkeley, and he studied philosophy, specifically Martin Heidegger. And so the class I took in, I think it was the fall of 83, was based in Heideggerian philosophy, if you can believe it. And what Heidegger says is we come in, as human beings, we come into existence when we're heard. So think about that. When you're heard, when you're known, when you're acknowledged as present, that's when you know you're alive. And so what I do is I want to make sure people know I hear them. Steve, I hear you. I know you. That's what I'm representing as I have my conversation. Now, this is much deeper than would be obvious, and it's something that I consider to be a practice that I've practiced for 40 plus years. The idea is if I listen well, what Heidegger says is that people, the human animal, is different than all other animals. You don't yell at your dog for being late. They don't have that concept. But what distinguishes the human animal from all others is we're animals of commitment, that we'll listen, that we can make a commitment or either succeed or fail, but there's commitment. So what he says is people are always already committed. The question is to what? So in a sales context or marketing or frankly, any relationship where you're trying to move forward, it's about listening. It's about getting deep and understanding. Because I'm not looking to trick them into something or get them to buy something. I'm looking for alignment. Does what I do and what do they do? Does that align? And can we advance accordingly? And then the other side of the authentic or the listening is compelling storytelling. So if you listen well and you understand what the other is trying to achieve, and then you share stories, tell narratives that are consistent with that, that's where things really can advance.
Well, you obviously do this very well, and it is probably your secret to your success and probably secret to many people's success, because that's how we connect with people. I think there's some cultures that call it "I see you."
Yes.
And which is exactly what you were talking about.
Yep.
I think a lot of people who are listening, they wonder, they have been in one industry for a very long time. They feel that they have skills, but they might not be applicable in the field. And yes, you stayed roughly in the same industry, but it's a very different structure to go from a corporate company to a startup. Talk to me about that impetus to do that specifically, rather than, you could have probably gotten a job somewhere else, doing something similar, doing another CMO job at another asset management company.
What I've come to learn is that I know how to build and build and advance relationships. That's what I know how to do. And so I know people, and there's a real equity in it. There's a real value in it. I'm about helping people do more and better business. More business and better quality business. That includes better quality of life. And another thing that I understand, and I'm sharing all this because it is so transferable, but important, is that what you see is what you get. the level of authenticity I bring to the equation is frankly unmatched because there's nothing, I got nothing to hide. It's all here. What else you want to know? And so I can be trusted. And if you're looking to move anything forward, it's a conversation for persuasion. And that's all built on trust. And if you don't have that, you don't advance. I teach it. I'm immersed in it. It's one of the reasons I enjoy teaching so much is that I'm reminded because what I'm describing is a practice. Knowing yoga does nothing. You got to do yoga. You got to practice yoga. You got or whatever the discipline might be. This is a discipline. It's a practice. And so that's what I practice every day. So as people are considering making a move, I always start with talk to the people you know, ask them what they think. It always turns into a conversation for opportunity, for possibility. It always does. As soon as I start talking about anything and I'm curious and interested and they start to share, you know who ought to talk to? You ought to talk to so-and-so. It always turns that.
There are a lot of really good things that you said. This specifically, I think, is around networking and having a network and the importance of a network. I think a lot of people struggle with that because they have very transactional relationships. And that goes back to what you said around authenticity. So you are who you are, and you're not afraid to share who you are. And that makes you authentic. And that's why people have closer relationships to you. That's why they trust you more. So when you are in a situation where you really need help, you have helped them or paid it forward so many times that they then are very willing and ready to help you. I think a lot of people struggle with that in mid-career, that they want to make the same amount of money or more than they did before. They want to get a bigger title than they had before. And some of that is driven because of what they believe the perception might be of them from others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Have you experienced that? And how do you think about that now?
Yeah, it's obviously a great question. I've had all the titles. It's not that they're meaningless. They mean something. They acknowledge something. I think that's important. But I kind of been there, done that. I've kind of, been to the mountaintop, not maybe penultimate mountaintop. Anyway, I've been as high as I want to go, and I'm doing what I want to be doing. I'm doing it in the way I want to be doing it. To me, it's freedom and it's high reward. And so much of that doesn't matter to me. I just reached a point where I'm very satisfied in my life. My favorite, what's term is grandpa. And for me, it's about doing good work. And my tombstone, what I'd love to say is he did good work. He contributed to the advancement of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And I might be a little too highfalutin, but you get my drift. It's about the contribution. It's about the advancement. It's about making a better place.
Yeah, I like actually the tombstone analogy. I think in my last podcast, at the end, I always have an exercise for people. And the exercise that I've used is actually something that I think the first time I did when I read The 7 Habits from Stephen Covey,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, however long it was ago. And and the exercise is that you imagine yourself at your own funeral and giving your own eulogy. And what is it that you would like people to think and have appreciated about you? I go through this, periodically, not all the time, of course, but I think it's a way for you to think about what really is important to you and how
Mm-hmm.
you would want to be. And if you're not like that now, then it can give you an incentive to become that person.
Yes.
We talked about a few books already. Are there any recommendations of resources of books or podcasts or articles that you really cherish that you would recommend to others?
Sure. Well, I mentioned David Book's current book, which is How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. One of my favorite quotes, I think, was actually about the book, or he was at a book signing or something like that. He says, you want to listen so hard, you lose weight. She's always one of my favorites about listening, about really getting to know people. I'm a huge fan of, we've read most of his books. Someone I just learned about, I don't know how I missed her, but you've heard of Frances Frei, F-R-E-I. She's a Harvard Business School professor. She's got a podcast called Fixable. She's done a bunch of work. She's got a TED Talk that is a must listen on leadership. And she talks about the trust triangle, which I've included now as part of what I talk about when I talk about my book. I gave a presentation recently about authentic and ethical persuasion. I use this as the opening slide, acknowledging her contribution to it. But she talks about the trust triangle of authenticity, empathy, and content. And that combination, she uses it in the leadership context. I use it in the persuasion context, which I don't think are all that different. So Frances Fry, I highly recommend, and has podcasts and books and all that, which I'm reading. And then another one I picked up recently, Scott Galloway. It's an NYU Stern professor. I just like he has an edge and calls him as he sees him. And I find him quite fascinating. And actually, this may sound like a plug, and I suppose it is, but my own book, I keep returning to it. When I teach it to the students at Babson, I review parts of it, just to remind myself to do what I say others should do. And it's something I think about quite a bit. And then,
Very, very good. Thank you for your time. This was a fun and lovely conversation that we've had. I think I would summarize it as around leadership, around networking, around building a life, around listening. And I think I've learned a lot. I think our listeners will learn a lot from it. Thank you, Jack, for your.
Yeah, my pleasure. This has been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it as well.
Today's exercise we've discussed with Jack the 3 important relationships. 1 is to have a mentor, 2 is to have a peer, and 3 is to have somebody that you can mentor, a mentee. For today, I would like you to select each of those. Make sure that you set up time with them. The mentor, of course, to learn from. The peer to spar with, where you can test your theories, you can talk to them about what's going on in your career and your life. And then lastly, a mentee, somebody that you're able to teach, listen to, and support throughout their career.